So welcome. Good to see you. Good to be with you today. Welcoming you into this space. And a reminder that whenever we come into a space of practice, there's an invitation to come as we are. So I'm inviting you to come as you are. If you feel good, if you don't feel good, if you feel aversion, if the moment is in some way not the way you'd like it to be, or your life or your body is in some way feeling unacceptable to you, then that's okay. You're welcome here, however you feel. And that's really the essence of this practice, is that we can open to, that we can align with the moment just as it is, and not some imagined perfection of a self or a moment or the way other beings we might wish them to be. So again, this welcome into Sangha, into the space of community in which we hear one another, we practice together, and we honor, as Kittisaro so often says, we honor what is worthy of honor. Remembering the dharma, remembering the practice, remembering our own capacity to awaken just in the smallest way or a big way. And today I want to talk about joy, and not just talk about it, practice with joy, the many different faces of joy. And one way of doing that is through chanting. And so I'm going to share my screen and we'll do a few chants together. So let me just move some things out of the way. Let's see, Jenna and Chris, can you see this, the chanting? Great. So I'm going to zoom in. I think I can do that. Zoom in. There we go. We'll do that once more. Great. So this first, on the top of page 3, this honoring of the Buddha, Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. And we'll do it in the Sri Lankan melody. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I just take a moment to feel the resonance, whether you are chanting with me or listening. The resonance of these ancient sounds in your body, in your heart. And then we'll go to the Mangala Sutta. And so this is a sutta on the teachings, the Buddha's teachings on the highest blessings. And I'd never really thought of this before. I've chanted this many, many times. But the last few months I've been really in my own life attuning to joy and noticing that this chant is naming many sources of joy within the practice. So we'll chant it together and then I'll just touch on some of them. So now let us chant the Buddha's teachings on highest blessings. Thus have I heard that the Blessed One was staying at Savatthi, residing at the Jeta's Grove in Anathapindika's park. Then in the dark of the night a radiant Deva illuminated all Jeta's Grove. She bowed down low before the Blessed One. Then standing to one side she said, Devas are concerned for happiness and ever long for peace. The same is true for humankind. What then are the highest blessings? Avoiding those of foolish ways, associating with the wise, and honoring those worthy of honor. These are the highest blessings. Living in places of suitable kinds. Oh, interesting. Let's see, can I do that? With the fruits of past good deeds, and guided by the rightful way. These are the highest blessings, accomplished in learning and craftsman skills, with discipline highly trained, and speech that is true and pleasant to hear. These are the highest blessings, providing for mother and father's support, and cherishing family, and ways of work that leave no blame. These are the highest blessings. I apologize as I find the rest of the chant. Here it is on the top of the page. Giving with dharma in the heart, offering help to relatives and kin, and acting in ways that leave no blame. These are the highest blessings, steadfast in restraint and shunning evil ways, avoiding intoxicants that dull the mind, and mindfulness in all things that arise. These are the highest blessings, respectfulness and of humble ways, contentment and gratitude, and hearing the Dhamma frequently taught. These are the highest blessings, patience and willingness to accept one's faults, seeing venerated seekers of the truth, and sharing often the words of Dhamma. These are the highest blessings. The holy life lived with ardent effort, seeing for oneself the noble truths, and the realization of Nibbana. These are the highest blessings, although involved in worldly ways. Unshaken the mind remains, beyond all sorrow, spotless, secure. These are the highest blessings. They who live with following this path know victory wherever they go, and every place for them is safe. These are the highest blessings. And let's close our chanting with a mantra from page 3. So Om Mani Padme Hum, number 5 in the mantra section. I'll zoom in just a little bit more. So you can see, so Om Mani Padme Hum, this reminder of realigning with the awakened heart, the jewel of the heart, and is also an honoring of the embodiment of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, Kuan Yin. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 So go ahead and stop my share so I can see you, we can see one another. And I'm going to just touch on some of the teachings, some of the sources of joy. This is not exhaustive, but that the Buddha taught and that were shared in the Mangala Sutta that we just chanted. And any time we're hearing Dhamma, it's a different way of learning. So we don't have to memorize, we don't have to get it cognitively. There's a way in which we can listen with our body, we can listen with our heart, we can notice what resonates and what doesn't resonate. We can let that go. Maybe it comes around again in another talk or shared in a different way that will land in the future. So I invite you, as we go from me sharing just a little bit of teaching into meditation, into silence together, and then again at the end of our time together, I'll share some Dhamma, but just inviting you to allow the sharing of Dhamma also to be part of your meditation. So finding for yourself a comfortable way to be in your body. And for me, this means that I have to sit on a support, and whether that's a cushion or a chair, and just to align so that there's some alignment in the sitting bones, the base of the pelvis. And there's some ability for your knees to release down away from your hip joints. So if you feel really tight in your hips, you might need to raise up your platform. If you have back pain, you might lie down. The Buddha taught lying on the side as a posture of meditation that also can keep us from falling asleep. You can stand up. You could walk if there's a lot of restless energy in the body. So this encouragement to bring awareness to your body and to align the body with the earth, and also to invite the mind to align with the earth body, the slower rhythm of the body. And as you hear my words on joy, just again allow them to enter and notice what arises in the mind, but also being really aware of the embodied response, of your own embodied response. And I also want to say that if today doesn't feel like a day that is filled with joy, I'll also be speaking about how joy and sorrow are two sides of the same coin. And so you might just allow your sorrow or your anger or your grief or your anxiety just to be held within this space of Sangha, which is one of the joys. A space of belonging, knowing that all of us have our own sorrow. So the Buddha taught about the joy of practicing non-harming, practicing the precepts. It's called the bliss of blamelessness, the joy of blamelessness. That moment when we decide not to cause harm to another with that angry word, or not to be so critical of ourselves. The joy of caring for others, offering protection. We've all had that experience of the checkout person, the cashier at a grocery store who's just patient with us as we can't find our credit card or the right change, and they're just there, not judging. The joy of spiritual friendship. You might feel that in this space. Maybe you don't know any of the other beings in this space, but you can touch into, we're all on this path. The joy of renunciation. This invitation for the mind just to let go of the myriad things, to align with this body, with this moment as it is. The joy of seclusion, of setting down the screen, the phone, the engagement with the world, just to be, to simplify, to allow ourselves to breathe in and breathe out. The joy of noticing the beautiful qualities of the mind of another being. This might be a memory or an image of a friend or another being that is kind, is patient, is generous. And feel that joy in our own heart. And then the joy of being present. It's called piti. Sometimes kind of like a bubbly joy that shows up in the body just from the practice of being with our experience, breathing in and breathing out. And the Buddha really encourages us to savor that joy. It can be easy to land on what is painful, or on being frustrated if the mind is restless. And it's not that we suppress that, but we can also notice it's also true that we're making an effort to be here. And there's also the more subtle happiness or ease when we just begin to relax with our experience. So you might notice that the possibility of relaxing just a little bit more. Letting the tops of your shoulders release. Allowing for a little lift at the base of your skull so that the back of the neck releases. Maybe your jaw can release a little bit away, lower jaw a little bit away from upper jaw. So there's more spaciousness around the skull, softening your eyes and the bridge of your nose. Can be the subtle enjoying of a deeper breath. That long, slow in-breath and the release of the out-breath. The nourishment of breathing in and relaxing then on the out-breath. And this breathing joy invites us into the joy of belonging. Your body, this body, is intricately woven into the web of life. And what you breathe in, the trees breathe out. What you breathe out, the trees breathe in. So even if the mind is very resistant, the body always belongs to this earth. So an invitation today, as we sit together in silence, just to notice and savor any of the sources of joy or ease, even if it's just placing your own hand on your heart when grief arises. And if the mind is caught up, is scattered, or there's a wave of emotion or mood, you might again notice that the moment is an invitation into savoring some small, blameless pleasure, the pleasure of sound, the pleasure of relaxing the body in some small way, the pleasure of breathing, the more subtle pleasure of the capacity for mindfulness, for heartfulness, this mysterious capacity of being aware of our experience. So no matter how difficult the moment is, we can be aware of what's here. We can offer ourselves maybe a phrase. May I be well. May I be at ease. May I hold this moment with kindness and compassion. This gentle offering of care, of protection, of nourishment for the mind and the heart. the life of the Buddha. There's many stories. These are archetypal stories that are teachings. And there's a story from the life of the Buddha that's really a deep teaching on this joy that comes from within, that is the joy of presence. And so, as you might know, the Buddha was raised in a very privileged world, and he was protected in his early years from any source of sorrow and of upset. So he was protected from seeing people who were aging. He was protected from seeing people who were dying. He was protected from seeing illness in beings around him. And he was given every sensory pleasure imaginable. But there was something in him, and I'm going to make the story much shorter than it truly is, but there was something in him that he actually had an experience of going outside the palace walls and seeing beings who were having these experiences, these human experiences of suffering, that made him realize that these external sources of pleasure were not the deep source of pleasure, and also couldn't help him to navigate the experiences, the very challenging experiences of old age and sickness and death and the many other forms of suffering. And so that sent him on his path. And as you know, he went into this path of extreme renunciation as a way of renouncing any form of pleasure. So going from one extreme to another, thinking there's a way that we can sort of lift ourselves out of this embodied plane of existence and sort of awaken outside of the body, and that any source of nourishment or enjoyment would obstruct that awakening. And he practiced this almost to the point of his own demise. And at one point, when he was extremely weak and hadn't eaten in days, and was practicing not even breathing, there was a young woman named Sujata who witnessed this practitioner and witnessed his effort, and thought, wow, he looks like he could use some nourishment. And so she brought him an offering of milk rice, and he took the offering, and it nourished him, and he had this realization that it was a blameless source of nourishment, and then it gave him this energy to practice. Sometimes you just need a good snack, right? And he had this memory of being a child and being at a festival and being in the protection of his father and withdrawing from the festivities and sitting under a rose apple tree. So this joy of seclusion, and of feeling his body, and of noticing his breath. Just this quiet joy of seclusion, this joy of embodiment, and of feeling that in-breath and the out-breath. And experience this blameless joy that uplifted his heart. And he thought, oh, maybe this is the path. So it sent him on this path of awakening. And there's many, many layers to that path. But this savoring of a blameless joy is something that we all have access to. But often we miss it because we're so focused, we're sort of biologically biased towards what might go wrong, towards what could be wrong, towards what is wrong. There are things that are not right, that are not as they should be, that are very difficult to navigate. And so there's a balancing that can take place in our practice and in our own nervous system, in our own body, by savoring and touching into these sources of blameless joy. We might also just have conditioning around joy. So I know I had experience as a child of just exuberance, being so excited, so joyful. And it's kind of like, oh, no, calm down or be quiet. Or, those around me didn't have that exuberance, that sense of childlike joy. And so this feeling of like, oh, it's not okay. It's not okay to be joyful. Or there's a author, Ross Gay, who has written a couple of books on joy that I really recommend. One is the Book of Delights, in which he spent a year writing an essay each day on something that delighted him. And so the sense that that things have to be going well to experience joy, that everything has to be okay for us to experience joy. And when Ross Gay is interviewed, he said, often people say, how can you talk about joy at a time like this? There's so much suffering in the world. And he said, how can we not? This deep source of protection for the heart, for the mind, for the body, through noticing these small sources of delight. So he names just a simple one of watching two people carry a bag of laundry together, and it's like this dance that they have to do to shift along and carry this one, handle one person on each side, and it's very awkward, but they're doing it together. This witnessing of this togetherness, of this just humanity that we are all a part of. And in the teachings of the Dharma, there's actually some very strong teachings on joy, and that is mudita. So for me, these other small sources of joy, of noticing the wonderful quirks of someone else, of noticing how someone else is being kind, noticing the joy of friendship and belonging, noticing the joy. Another one that Ross Gay names that I love is the joy of things that are, he calls them janky, just like using whatever you have and making it work. And I've had a long history of this. I used to have a car that had no heat. And so I had to wear this massive, I live in a place where it's cold in the winter, this massive down coat, this purple that we had gotten at some kind of garage sale, and a hood, because you had to drive with the window open, otherwise it would fog up. And then you also had a squeegee to squeegee the inside of the window when it fogged up. So the passenger would be squeegeeing while they were driving. Then if you had anybody in the back, we had a sleeping bag in the back. I remember at one point my dad and his wife visiting, and they were sitting in the back under the sleeping bag, and we're driving along. And for so long, I was embarrassed by these things. This is just one of many things that were janky in my life and have been. And thought, oh, I kind of have to have everything perfect. That's it, that's how it should be. And then reading this essay by Ross Gay, I thought, gosh, there's so much joy in just that thing. You named someone using a shopping cart as a trellis, in their garden. Just like whatever you've got, making it work. Whatever you've got in your life, kind of making it work. And that we can share in that joy when we see others doing the same. And that these sources of joy for me are like a training ground for mudita. Because mudita, of the four Brahma Viharas of metta, loving kindness, karuna, compassion, mudita, sympathetic joy, the joy in the joy of others, the happiness of others, and equanimity, upekkha. I always thought of mudita as kind of like, oh, that's like the fluffy one. That's like not really a serious Brahma Vihara. It's like karuna is like you're really in there, you're in the trenches. But then, for me, I realized that actually a lot of my suffering comes from comparing myself to others. Like there's something that maybe it'd be helpful if you knew about me. So if we meet in the future, you could accommodate for me. And that's that I have a lot of suffering around having advanced degrees. I don't have an advanced degree. And although in my mind, I'm very comfortable with that, I've had a lot of other forms of education and I love my work and whatnot. There's something in my nervous system that is set off when I see like those words PhD, those letters after someone's name, or someone just mentions like, oh yeah, when I did my dissertation. It's like my body starts to kind of vibrate in a weird way and I just start to kind of shrink. And so if you do have an advanced degree, if you could just not mention that in conversation, that would be great. It makes it easier for me. There's a woman on the island who has a bumper sticker on her car that says finished, like PhD finished. And when I live on a small island, so I see that, a lot. And it's like, oh man, it's like there again and again. And so this is for me, it's like mudita. When we look at mudita, it often highlights the opposite, which is when we don't have joy in the accomplishment of others. When the accomplishment of others is highlighting like this pressure point in our sense of self. And we can become curious about that. Like I get really curious about like, wow, what is this? So funny, that this joy in my life, and that yet there's some sense of like not enough or didn't do or should have done. That's culturally conditioned. And so it's actually a really rigorous practice to notice that also in our culture, there's often kind of a sense of lack, the sense of if someone else has something, that is taking something away from us. This assumption like there's not going to be enough. There might not be enough happiness. It's like, oh, that person's doing so well. Then what does that mean for me? I might not get mine. It's like a very capitalist mindset in a way. And so we can notice that there's some conditioning around that in our lives. And that actually the truth is that the joy of another, the accomplishment of another is a benefit to us, right? We can be uplifted by that. That uplifts our community. It uplifts our world. When another being has, fallen in love, or they've, found new peace in their practice, or they have a new job, or they got an advanced degree, whatever it is, this is actually something that enriches our own life when we can really feel into the truth of our belonging. So this sympathetic joy that is very powerful, that also, like all the Brahma Viharas, turns us towards these places of challenge within ourselves and highlights them. So sometimes when we turn towards joy, what we notice is sorrow. What we notice is the places of our inner critic, and that actually in and of itself is a joy. Like this process for me of examining my own feelings around education and what that means and all the conditioning around that. It's actually been really joyful over the years to examine that, to be with that, to recognize what is my own path, what's good for me, what works for me, what worked for that person, how wonderful, And so there's a way in which when we open to joy, it can allow us, it can give us the capacity and actually the protection of the heart to be with our own difficulty, to be with our own suffering. And like all the Brahma Viharas is a form of protection for the heart, protection for the mind. This reminder of what is actually true, of this relational nature of our being. So I wanted to close with a quote by Ross Gay from his book, Inciting Joy. And he says, what happens if joy is not separate from pain? What if joy and pain are fundamentally tangled up with one another? Or even more to the point, what if joy is not only entangled with pain or suffering or sorrow, but is also what emerges from how we care for each other through these things? And for me, this is the answer to that question, how can we talk about joy at a time like this? How can we not? So what if joy is not only entangled with pain or suffering or sorrow, but is also what emerges from how we care for each other through these things? What if joy, instead of a refuge or relief from heartbreak, is what effloresces from us as we help each other carry our heartbreaks? So what if joy, instead of refuge or relief from heartbreak, is what effloresces from us as we help each other carry our heartbreaks? So I'd like to close with an offering, a dedication of merit of our time together. But may the benefit of our practice together, of our time together, may any joy or happiness or wisdom or compassion or metta that has been generated from these moments of being together in the Dhamma, may it radiate out. May it touch the hearts of all beings. May all beings be safe. May all beings experience the happiness of well-being. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum.